Hello again, everybody. This is Steve, coming to you with actually a continuation of a previous uh, teaching that I did on money in writing for fantasy and sci-fi. Well, money in economies, really, commerce and things like that. The thing is, though, in the last one, I realized that I kind of leaned a little heavily on the fantasy side of things, but I didn't cover the sci-fi all that much. I was covering the basics of e-commerce and how that stuff works. But more, it was like on the fantasy side, and I could do more on the fantasy side if you guys need to. Things like carding and trade and shipping and all that kind of stuff. But the first one was more kind of a rough overview. But again, I kind of leaned a little heavily on the fantasy side of things. So this time I'm going to cover more the sci-fi side of things, because in sci-fi you have a lot more ways of doing things. Now some of this can tie back to fantasy because there are ways to make kind of this digital or virtual currency thing work in fantasy too. The Bookworm anime, and there's a couple other series and stuff out there that use a virtual currency system, but I'll cover that more in another video. But anyways, in this one, I'm covering a lot of just the different ways that you can do currencies in your sci-fi books. Sorry for the brief pause. I just realized I should probably write that down if I'm going to go ahead and do that in the future, so that I don't forget to do it. Because I was like, yeah, I got to do that, and then I realized, oh, I don't have notes for that. Okay, yeah. And I mean, at my age, my memory will just go out the window like a squirrel. Anyways, oops. Okay. Sorry, my cat's interjecting his thoughts on this. This right here is one image I found to bring in as an example. This comes from Battlestar Galactica, and this is an actual physical currency. Now, in sci-fi, primarily the currencies are going to be digital, but the currencies also rely on infrastructure. So, depending on how your infrastructure is, how strong, how weak, how available it even is, physical currencies may be a necessity. In Battlestar Galactica, if I remember correctly, long-range communication was not that great. Again, if I'm remembering it correctly. Meaning that you couldn't have this interconnected digital e-commerce system going back and forth between the different areas. Therefore, the fallback was to have a physical currency. So that is one way, depending on your sci-fi. Like if you're into hard sci-fi, which is everything that we understand that is proven science, not theoretical. Then you're going to need to have a hard currency to make your actual economy work. I mean, it's a little clumsy, but when you consider the fact that, okay, you've got state-of-the-art starships, but you don't have any way to facilitate long-range digital transactions, hard currency is going to be necessary. There are ways to do that, and it's more than just paper notes. You can actually have hard currency. Like this right here is an example of one possible way to do hard currency. Now, you don't have to describe this in your book if you don't want to, but this is one way to do hard currency. And 50 cents, 25 cents, 10 cents, $10, whatever. In this case, it was the qubit from Battlestar Galactica. So just different ways you could do it. I mean, if you look at hard currency, the Chinese and some Oriental cultures actually had certain coins that I think the Aztecs even had them, although I'm not totally sure. I know the Orientals did, where you had certain coins that had large holes in the center of them. So you had a standard sized coin, but it had a lot less metal to it, and it could be put on a rope or a string or something and hung from your neck like jewelry, or you could use that string as kind of your wallet. Well, you can also do the same thing in sci-fi, because you could take ideas that were used in antiquity and use them in modernity, because there's things that we do in modernity that they did in antiquity. So you got to consider that. There's also the different cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are just digital currencies. They call them cryptocurrencies just because of the way they're made. Made and secured. But you have Bitcoin and Ripple and different ones like that. These are really popular right now. The advantage of these is you can be completely digital in your transactions, and you can be completely quote-unquote off-grid in your transactions. Because the reason I say off-grid, in a normal system, at least the way we understand it, there is a middleman, a bank that is involved. A bank, sometimes a government, sometimes a private organization, but the middleman is required for a lot of transactions. The Knights Templar is a good example of that middleman system. Back in medieval times, during the Crusades and stuff like that, the Knights Templar had set up a system that was interesting. It was kind of the first digital currency without being digital. Or, well, technically it was the first crypto. Because what they did was when somebody wanted to go on a trip, back then it was very easy to go somewhere and get robbed along the way multiple times. So what they did was they had a system that if you went to, let's say you went from Paris to Rome, just to use that as an example, and you had to stop along the way several times. If there was a Knights Templar station there, what you would do is before you left, you would take most of your currency that you were going to take with you, and you would convert it into this little encrypted note. How the exact encryption worked, I don't know. That was lost to history, which is probably intentional, so that people can't figure out how to hack it. But what they would do is they would take your money and they would encrypt it, and to give you this little receipt, basically. And to bandits, the receipt was useless because it was only decryptable by the owner. Basically, the owner had his decryption key. I'm using modern terminology for something that was in antiquity, but basically he had his decryption key. And that decryption key was needed to decrypt that note. And the Knights Templar on the other end would decrypt it, find out how much the note was for, and say it was for 600 gold pieces. Okay, and the person at the destination only needs 20 gold pieces. Fine. They will give you 20 gold pieces, and they will give you a new encryption note which says you now have 580 gold pieces in that encrypted note. Same encryption key, just encrypted in just a different encryption string or whatever it was. And then you take your 20 gold coins that you got from the Knights Templar, and you passed it down to, or then you would go on to the next station, and they might decrypt it and give you another 20 gold coins. And then certain other people would be coming maybe the other direction, and they would be bringing gold and silver with them, so they encrypt that into the note, and then move on to the next one. They add more to it, and it was just their way of doing kind of a digital cryptocurrency in a sense in antiquity when they didn't have anything digital. So that's another way to look at it. That's one way to do that kind of thing in your story. Now there are systems that are completely digital. There are systems like, what they're talking about nowadays about a digital dollar, where it's literally the dollar in digital form, which technically isn't far from where we are right now. The only thing that keeps us from being completely digital in the dollar realm, or really any currency, is the fact that there's still physical currency out there. And people that prefer to use cash, they prefer to use checks and stuff like that. So there's not a complete digital transaction framework. But the thing is, there's still infrastructure to that, like I mentioned before. Crypto is really the only one that has no infrastructure per se, and I can't say it doesn't have infrastructure entirely, simply for the fact that Bitcoin and all the cryptos live on the blockchain. Without the blockchain, crypto doesn't work. Although it does kind of work. I mean, it can be independent of the blockchain. The way it works is a little complex in my thinking, but basically, you can transact privately from person to person using little handheld portable Bitcoin wallets or crypto wallets, and you can take out small portions of that crypto and give it to somebody else, and that stays off the grid. But when that person wants to transact from one person to the next without using one of those portable wallets, then it has to go on the grid. Then it has to go out into the infrastructure and be registered on the blockchain and things like that. One advantage too of a digital currency is the currency can be in fractional units. I don't know what the smallest unit of that fractional, those fractional units are. Like how small of a Bitcoin can you put out there? Can you put out like 0.000001 Bitcoins? But that's something to think about. What's going to be your smallest denomination? Well, that's the case with anything when you're talking about digital currencies and stuff. One thing you can look at too is, does your system that you come up with need to live on an actual infrastructure? Does it need banks? Does it need a blockchain? Does it need any of that, or is it completely independent? One idea might be that like you have credits, like Star Wars uses credits. They don't explain how the credits work, just the credits exist. And theirs is also one of those hybrids where you could have it in physical and you could have it in digital. The credits, there's an idea for your writing. Maybe every one of your credits that goes out digitally has a fingerprint on it, some kind of ID number. Like let's say like your credit is credit number 64265371 blah 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 blah, out 70 digits. And or if there's enough of them out there, you could have 700 digits. You could also have those values be represented alphanumerically. That this particular digital credit is A625FJM7 or something like that. Just as an example of how you could do the tracking number. And the reason I say you should have a tracking number is, okay, I gave you 7 credits. How do you know that my 7 credits are legitimate? How do you know they're valid? Well, that ID number in some kind of tracking system lets you know this is legitimate. Maybe an encryption system, a tracking system, an ID system, something that works within a framework. That might be one way to add validity to it. Now, that doesn't mean you have to in your story, but it's something to keep in mind. Because it might be, okay, I'm going to give you 60 credits for this particular item, and you don't need all that background information. And it may come up in a situation in your story where you're like, well, how do I know your credits are valid? How do I know they're legitimate? Okay, now you need the system that validates that credit is legitimate. Same thing happens in Bitcoin, in cryptos. They have a way to validate that coin or that fractional coin is legitimate. So, just again, something to think about. It's probably overthinking the situation, but still something to think about. Trying to think of other things I could suggest. Well, anyways, that's just something to think about. And it's like valid. It's how much do you need to validate that person's stuff is legitimate? Because that kind of if you go back to fantasy, you could go down there and you could test the metals because you had the physical product. You could actually test that and say, yeah, okay, that's actual gold. It's this purity. It's this weight. So I verify that your item or your digital currency, not digital currency, your physical currency is legitimate. And another thing you have to remember when it comes to transactions, money, digital currency, physical currency, whatever it is a medium. It is a middleman. That's all it is. The item itself, be it crypto, gold, silver, whatever, well, I shouldn't say does not have value, but may not have value. That's kind of the idea. Well, if you want a good example of what I'm talking about, think of like the coat check systems that they have at hotels and theaters and stuff. You come in, you hand the guy your coat, he hands you a slip. The only way you're getting your coat back is if you come back with that slip, hand it to him, and get your coat back. So it's kind of that idea where person A buys product B, or buys a product from person B, and person A doesn't have the thing that person B needs. So the medium is they use money. And then that money is then brought to the next person who has the item, which will be, person C, has the item that person B needs, so they take that money and buys that item. So it acts as a middleman without having to barter your way over to what you need. I've seen barters like up in Alaska and out in some other areas where you go through 6, 7, 8 people before you finally are able to get the item you need. And sometimes you have to do a little homework to get there. So it makes life a lot simpler. It's not, so like if, let's say if society crashed tomorrow, we can go back to the barter system. It's just not going to be convenient. That's the thing. It'll work. We can get what we need, but it's not going to be convenient. And it's subjective. It's there's a bunch of things to it. But a barter's a good system. I'm not saying it isn't. It's just that you have to realize that you're not necessarily going to get what you want on the first try unless you have something that's a middleman in those transactions, and that's what money is, be it in physical form or digital form. It is that middleman. Oops. Now, this one right here is an interesting picture I found. This is another way to do a physical currency. They're kind of like coins, but they're coins with denominations on them. Now, the actual value of the materials may not be the face value of the coin. Now, some of them with the coins, the face value is equal to the actual value of the materials it's made out of. Some of them it's not. Taking like the American currency system, since it's the one I know best. Pennies cost 3 cents per penny to make, so their face value is not equal to the material value. Nickels, I think, and dimes have kind of the same problem. Once you get up to a quarter, then you don't have that problem. Dollar bills, even just paper bills. You could have a $100 bill, for example. The face value and the trading value is $100. The actual material value might be 15, 20 cents. So it's cheaper to produce than the actual face value of the material. So that's, again, something you have to consider when you're doing your currency, is what is the face value versus the physical value. And I know you're probably like, why does that matter? It depends on the story. In some of them, it might matter. In some of them, it might not. In Off-World Chronicles, one of the things that I bring up during one of the transactions in Bremen Tabaro, they when Simon's trying to hire a ship, they talk about they actually talk in a British weights and measures from antiquity about pounds sterling and stuff like that, and how much the value of the material is, and because they don't come in with like a British pound or something. What they do is they come in with gold coins from the domain of Caspar, and the transaction happens in a way that's kind of how do I say this? It's I'd have to go look it up because I can't remember at the moment. But basically, he figures out here's how much it is, and this is what it's equivalent to, and this is what we agreed to on the price. And that one's done on the physical value of the material, because the coin they have is gold, but it's not the local currency. So at that point in time, you're not dealing with the face value of the coin, you're dealing with the material value of the coin. So that's something else you have to consider. Because and also monetary exchange is something you'll want to consider. Again, these aren't necessarily things that you're going to use in every story. You may never use them, or you may use them a lot, but it's still something you want to think about and have in the back of your mind, because not everybody's going to run around and have the same currency. They're not going to have the same coins, the same bills, because in the United States, it's the American dollar. You go up to Canada, it's the Canada dollar. You go down to Mexico, it's the peso. And there's the forex markets where you do all of this exchange and stuff like that to the different currencies. So again, something to think about. This is another one I found that makes for kind of a neat way to think of your coins. If you want to get really creative with your coins in a physical form, this is a cool way to do it. I don't know why I have that one. This is another one. This is a parody, but this is kind of another way you could do your physical currency if you want to do physical currency. Call it space bucks, if you will. But again, that's something something to put in the back of your mind on how to do that. And going back to this one, now that I think about why I had this one, something. What was it? Well, I already talked about the infrastructure. Oh, that's what it was. Something else you have to think about is what is accepted in the local area. This even goes for fantasy, although I'm primarily focusing on sci-fi this time. What is the locally accepted currency? Going back to the Off-World Chronicles, I was talking about Bremen Tabaro and the exchange, or the bartering that they did for travel, and how they figured out what is the price, how much is it worth, etc., like that. Since they were dealing with currencies from two different kingdoms, they dealt with the material at hand, which was gold coin, its weight, and its value and stuff like that. Not Crassus, it was that was Lucius. Can't remember his name, but anyways, he was the bosun's mate that was negotiating this with Simon. And anyways, yeah, he went with the physical value of the coin. And when they go across the ocean when they went across the ocean to Grootwand, one of the things that they would have done there is the exact same thing. Is they would have bartered for the actual physical value of the gold coins. Now, that being said, they could have rolled. Simon and team could have rolled in there and started bartering with Lucius, and Lucius, I think, or whatever the guy's name was. And they could have started, the bosun's mate. They could have started bartering with him, and he'd be like, "Okay, well, what kind of coins do you have?" "Well, we got coins from Caspar." "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't accept those." Transaction just came to a grinding halt. I mean, that didn't actually happen in the book, but I'm just saying in real life that can happen, where they're like, "I don't care if it's gold or not. We will not accept it because it's from such and such a kingdom." Now you gotta go find somebody to go melt the coins down and restamp them in the local accepted the local accepted denomination or currency or coinage or whatever like that. And I actually saw that in I can't remember the exact name of it. It was I think it was Into My Eternity was the name of the anime. And they actually ran into the main character actually ran into a situation like this. He says, I want one of those. And he says, okay, what you got? And he tosses down the currency, but it was from a different, the coins were from a different kingdom. And he says, I don't accept that here. Well, it's valid currency. He says, yeah, but I don't accept that here. He says, I don't care if it's face value. I don't care if you're trying to trade on the face value of the material. I don't care what you're trying to do. We do not accept that, period. He's like, okay, what do you accept? He says, well, I'll take swords. He says, okay, so he gives him 3 swords. So that, that right there could be a plot element where somebody comes in and they're living high on the hog. They walk into this other kingdom and the kingdom goes, nope, we don't accept your coinage. We won't even take it for scrap metal. Okay, now all of a sudden you just went from, the rich traveler to the pauper, because suddenly you have nothing to trade with. Especially like if they go into the goldsmiths and the goldsmith's like, I ain't touching that stuff. That's from such and such a kingdom. They're our enemy. I'm not going to take their gold. Uh-oh. So, that's something else too. Speaking of economies that I happen to think about. This actually comes from antiquity. They had a situation where a king, I think from Persia, I'm not sure if it was Persia, but it might have been, went over to the Middle East where Jordan and Israel and Egypt and stuff was. I think it was that general area. But anyways, he comes in and he has this huge caravan, which was pretty normal for nobility. And he brought with him just bucket tons of gold coins. And the people happily accepted them because they were like, gold is gold. We don't care if it's not in our current denomination or coinage. The problem was he spent so much gold there, he caused massive inflation. So inflation is something you're going to have to deal with too. What's the local economy? Are they desperate for coinage? Are they not desperate for coinage? Are they rich? Are they poor? How do they live? What's their lifestyle? What's their standard of living? Just again, and I throw these out as a generalization, but it's things you want to consider and you need to consider. And again, they don't have to be specifically dictated in the story, but it's a really good idea to put them in to the information file, so to speak, anyways. Because, like, going back to my story, for example, you go into Bremen Tabaro, and you've got all these rich pirates. And I say rich because they're out there raiding stuff and coming home with chests of gold. So these guys are loaded. Then you go across the way to Grootwand. Not so loaded. Grootwand is what is it? Grootwand is kind of a fishing kingdom. I mean, they've got money, but compared to Bremen, Tabaro, and Caspar, no, they're kind of the poor stepchild. And so then you come in there and, like in Bremen, Tabaro, you wave around 9 gold coins, and everyone's like, oh, that's cool. You go over to Grootwand, you wave around 9 gold coins, and suddenly you're in the Ritz-Carlton. So that, just like I say, that it depends on the local economy, whether they're rich, they're poor, how much they need the money. Do they need money more? Do they need resources more? Because again, going back to barter, they may need food and water more than they need your gold. So your gold might be worth very little, but you got a ham sandwich, and suddenly you're King Louis. So, and that's all part of how the economies work. It's what is most needed, what is the best medium of transaction or exchange. It's just different things like that. And like I say, I've kind of, even in this second video, just between the two of them that I've done about money and economies and stuff, I've kind of covered the surface of it. I'm leaving a lot of this to you. All I'm doing is I'm throwing the match in the fire. It's your job to have, to take that little the lit match and add firewood and kindling and all that stuff to it and build it up to where it's, it makes for a good story. And like I say, don't be afraid to info dump on yourself. Don't be afraid to go hog wild with the details in the background. That's fine. Even if it's when you info dump on the reader that it's not fine. But if you info dump in the background, you build this whole world, this whole infrastructure, everything. That will have a big impact on where your story goes, how it goes, what you do with it, how how different things affect the characters and so on. Like, in the story, you might have the main character walk into this castle town and everybody's starving. But he doesn't, the story really doesn't say why he's starving. In the background, you've got this whole thing of, oh yeah, there was these big wars, and then there was this drought, and the crop harvests were horrible for the past 3 years, and then we got these raiding Mongols or whatever, or, well, not Mongols, but they would have, like, these raiding orcs and goblins, and they're over here trashing the farms and killing our cows, so everybody's starving. But in the actual story, the only thing you see is you walk in and everybody's starving. But there's no there's no explanation needed. Well, there may not in that situation, but you may not need to explain it, or you may need to explain a little bit of it. But you only give the reader just what they need for that situation. Behind the scenes, yeah, you can have this whole detailed explanation of what's going on and use it for your benefit. Maybe the clothes that they wear, what the clothes are made out of. What is the primary meal? Is it like thinned out soup? Is it them going out and eating mushrooms, eating tree limbs? What are they taking, like a specific tree and plucking all of its leaves and boiling that up, and hey, that's dinner. It's the, I guess a good example of this is a car drives down the road. Okay, fine. Why does it drive down the road? Well, the reader only needs to know that it's driving down the road. Underneath it, you've got the engine, the transmission, you've got the driver, you've got the wheels, you've got the car frame, the gas tank with the fuel that runs the engine, you've got the oil that lubricates the engine. So if you get my idea here, or what I'm trying to express is basically the reader needs to see the car. You need to see the nuts, bolts, and gears and everything of that car, so that you can more accurately describe that car. Like, it can go 65 miles an hour. Why can it go 65 miles an hour? Well, here's this whole list of why it can go 65 miles an hour rather than 80. So, anyways, I've talked about enough on this one. So, rather than talk your ear off for another 2 hours, I'll stop it here. And if you guys want me to go over more things dealing with, economy, trading, stuff like that, either on the sci-fi, fantasy side, or both, please let me know. I'm more than happy to share my experiences. I mean, I've been doing this for what is it? Probably 32 years. So I've been through pretty much everything. Well, I've seen what works, what doesn't. I can't necessarily remember all of that, but if you bring up a question, I probably can. So, anyways, I'll leave it at that, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.